The crackdown on Nigeria's crypto industry has left its young residents feeling more mistrustful and bewildered. The Central Bank of Nigeria and the National Security Advisor are planning stricter regulations, marking a significant shift from the previous administration's approach. Despite this, Nigeria has shown significant interest and growth in cryptocurrency transactions, particularly in remittances. However, there are concerns about the impact of the crackdown on the industry's future and job opportunities. Dr. Iwa Salami, Associate Professor in Financial Law and Regulation, University of East London in London, UK, joins me for this. Thank you for joining me today.
And thank you for having me. It's a delight to be here.
All right, well, Nigeria seems to be clamping down on crypto exchanges, and fintechs had to, probably close shop on crypto following the classification of cryptocurrency trading as a national security issue by the NSA, Nuhu Ribadu. However, do you think this is going a little too far?
Well, the crackdown, of course, has come at a time when, in the industry, there's been a lot of movement around how to actually deal with issues with crypto assets transactions. And globally, we have financial regulation and regulation really that really caters for the pain points of crypto assets, including things like, the anti-money laundering and terrorism financing provisions that deal with the money laundering financial crime threats. In the case of Nigeria, over the past few months, there have been several issues that have arisen around the potential for crypto assets to be used as a tool to facilitate speculation that has then led to bringing down the value of the naira. To a lesser extent, there has been issues around using crypto assets to facilitate crime. But I think what isn't very clear really is the big issues here that has warranted this, I'd say, drastic actions coming from regulators in Nigeria. So, of course, that has been the reason why people actually are thinking maybe this may be slightly more extreme than, not proportional an approach to regulating the space, only because we see now that enough regulation is coming out across the world, and a lot of countries are adopting this to actually allow the industry to thrive.
I'd like to take you on this particular one. Do you think we have enough data to show that these exchanges or some of these trading activities are directly or indirectly, sort of swinging the naira's value? Do we have data to actually emphatically say this is what is happening, before going on ahead with this scam that we're seeing every other day?
So that's a very good question, because in all of this, there hasn't really been any clear evidence as to why these actions have been taken. Although we know that we have, blockchain analytic firms that actually work quite closely with crypto asset exchanges to let regulators know what is actually going on. So these are regulatory technologies and what we in fact call RegTech solutions providers who actually can make regulators see what's going on in terms of the types of transactions, money passing through, outflow of currency, of the type of data really that we want. Nothing has been pointed towards those types of data. And so that even makes it slightly more, if you like, questioning as to, really what's driving all of this. But we do have blockchain solutions, analytical firms that can actually show us what's going on. But there really hasn't been any pointers as to where this data is coming from.
All right, so apart from this Naira conversation, you've mentioned another concern, which is the concern the regulators have about the risk of terrorism financing and money laundering. And I know this is largely due to its pseudonymous nature, but how can we ensure that, cryptocurrencies' financial freedom doesn't become a tool for illicit activities? I'm just saying, how do we ensure that, some of the freedom that we have in cryptocurrency exchanges and all of that does not sort of encourage some of those things that we do not want to see, like money laundering and illicit flow of funds?
So there's two ways that crypto assets can be transacted. It could be transacted on centralized virtual asset service providers or centralized crypto asset service provider platforms, or they could also be transacted through decentralized finance platforms. Now, when they're transacted on centralized crypto assets exchanges, those across the world are now being regulated. So across the world, the international standard setter, or it's like the international watchdog, the Financial Actions Task Force, has kind of sort of led the way here, providing recommendations for countries to actually follow, instituting what is known as the travel rule that makes crypto asset exchanges or requires that crypto asset exchanges know who is transacting on them, and also that for certain types of transactions, depending on the limit and the amount, that where the funds are actually the communication between who sends the funds and the communication, i.e. the exchange that sends the fund and the exchange that receives the funds, that requirement as to knowing the parties that actually sending and receiving on those exchanges are that we know the identities of those parties through what is known as these travel rules, depending on the amount that's being transacted. And a lot of exchanges, crypto asset exchanges, have implemented these. So the question of sort of terrorism financing and financial crime can actually be monitored because we have this provision. And like I said, we have solutions. We have RegTech solutions providers that help exchanges implement these regulatory requirements. So those solutions exist. Totally different from the transactions that happen in decentralized finance, i.e. in the decentralized finance space, where to date we still don't have the requirements for people, for those platforms to tell us or show us the people that are transacting on them. Now, for the provisions that have been passed so far, or the clampdown that have been passed so far from the Nigerian context, they have been targeted at centralized crypto asset service providers who can actually, meet those requirements, who can actually require that we know the parties transacting on them in order for us to really fulfill the know your customer requirements that tends to want to deal with problems like terrorism financing and financial crime. The whole idea around financial crime and terrorism financing and money laundering is really around us knowing the parties that are transacting in those spaces. And if we know those parties, when suspicious activities happen, we know who they are, we can track them down. And as I say, those solutions actually exist.
All right, so looking at all that's been happening, in recent times, do you think that Nigeria is just sort of trying to get itself off the grey list of the Financial Action Task Force? Do you think that's what all of this is about?
So there are ways that Nigeria can get itself off of the grey list imposed by the Financial Action Task Force. And like I said, the Financial Action Task Force, puts recommendations out there for that, the Nigerian authorities can actually follow. Again, there are solutions that, Nigeria can require exchanges to comply with, i.e. sort of RegTech, in order for us to know what is happening on those exchanges. So I wouldn't really say that these actions are necessary to comply with, to be taken off the grey list. No, because there are ways that we could regulate to ensure that the Nigerian regulators can actually get what they want in terms of knowing who is transacting on the spaces, in terms of implementing sort of KYC, preventing financial crime, money laundering. So I mean, if we're saying this is to get them off the grey list, I think there are other ways to actually go about it than actually instituting regulations that potentially stifle the industry and potentially sort of prohibit quite a few people in the economy that are quite reliant actually on this, on crypto asset exchanges, given the unemployment situation.
All right, we'll come to that conversation, but before then, we anticipate a meeting today between SEC Chief and, international and local crypto exchanges. What are your thoughts? What do you think will come out of that particular meeting, or what are your expectations, really?
So I have to say, hearing about that meeting for me was quite impressive because I think the beginning of the conversation of us having regulation that is effective in an industry that has potential is around getting all the necessary stakeholders and parties around the table to actually have conversations and discussions as is being done and continues to be done across the world and across countries where regulators actually are forward thinking about financial innovation and financial technology. So it's a good thing that the Securities and Exchange Commission have actually, called for this meeting that brings together industry players, blockchain, those from blockchain, crypto asset community, to actually sit down to actually have that conversation about the issues and about really how best to approach it, and also to discuss, the approaches, workable approaches to regulation. In the UK, we had this similar approach way back, I'd say in 2022, where the Financial Conduct Authority brought together, technologists, crypto asset industry players, brought together, obviously, regulators from the SEA, were there, academics, because I attended that as well, I was invited to attend that. And it was an amazing experience because we had all the key stakeholders sat by a table, teasing out and having conversations about the best approach to regulating the crypto asset industry. And I think that's a very good step because until we actually do that, what we're going to be having are very unclear actions that's not needed for the growth of the industry that has potential. And what we will keep having would be pretty much almost like knee-jerk reactions. So something has happened and we feel we're going to ban or stifle or prevent people from accessing crypto asset exchanges. And all of these don't quite really cut it. And fundamentally, because we have the decentralized finance platform where people who are hell-bent on engaging in crypto asset transactions will go to. So if they cannot access the crypto assets, if they can't access centralized crypto asset exchanges because they're heavily regulated, they will find a way. And they will do that through the decentralized finance platforms, which is even far more difficult for regulators to exist. So for regulators to regulate. So I think this conversation with the community, of the crypto assets community and the industry is a good thing. It's a good way ahead to devising, I'd say, effective regulation for the space.
I like your optimism, but you know that this is the same country that sort of released some regulations for VASP last year, and a lot of persons were optimistic that this is a good signal. So are you confident that at the end of the day, after this meeting, we would also come back to this point where, we keep having this calm down and all of that? I mean, I'm just looking at it, I'm asking, doesn't this signal conflicts in directives and policy somersault, really?
You're right, I have to say. Yes, because of course we know that the messages that has come out in the approach to regulating crypto assets in Nigeria hasn't been a very consistent one. Initially, there was that whole approach of be careful, and then we had an approach of banning, and then we have an approach of actually release the ban, and then we're having an approach of taking away access, bringing on board the telecoms regulators to take away access to people to access, quite big crypto asset exchanges like Binance and Coinbase and the like. So it's a huge conflict of information and messaging going out. But like I say, a good starting point is to actually bring everybody around the table. Nothing is guaranteed that, this is just baby steps, first steps. Nothing is guaranteed that actually they come together, we would have effective regulation. We'll start that process towards implementing effective regulation. But it's a good thing that the regulators want to actually sit with industry players because conversations can be had, approaches can be had, and not, I don't think, across the world, not everybody who wants to, engage in crypto asset industry is a fraudster. And I think regulators should be coming at it from the perspective of actually we want to see an industry thrive, an industry that has potential to create jobs, an industry that has potential to facilitate financial inclusion, an industry that has potential to, give opportunities to MSMEs and SMEs, and I think regulators should have a look at it from that perspective and
Okay.
want to make it work rather than sort of stifling innovation. So balance, I think, is a good thing here, and hopefully, these conversations would achieve that.
All right, Dr. Iwa Salami, that's a good place to end it. Balance is what we seek, especially looking at the money that is involved in that particular industry. We cannot just let it go away when we can do something about it. Thank you so much, Dr. Iwa Salami, Associate Professor in Financial Law and Regulation, University of East London. Thanks again for your thoughts.